Welcome back to another SQUAWK 876 episode where today we have Captain Richard Cunningham from Flyadeal Airlines. So, good day, Captain Richard. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Alright, so we want to know more. Who was Richard like as a child? What was life growing up?
Life was like any normal kid in Jamaica. Get trouble sometimes. Yeah, not all the time, but a fair amount. I did a few sports. I played squash as a child. I used to swim for my school. Played softball for my school.
Which school did you attend?
I went to Capt. Yeah.
So at what age did you become interested in aviation, and when did you know that that's what you wanted to pursue as a career?
Well, I knew I wanted. I was interested in it, in being a pilot. Just coming out of high school, really. But at the time, I couldn't afford it. I tried going the military way, but that didn't work out either. So I pretty much just gave up on it until about 20 years later, when I had the opportunity to pursue it again.
So tell us more about your certifications and where you acquired them.
I did my PPL here at Wings, Jamaica. My instructor was Nick Shaw, who is now a captain at Caribbean Airlines. This was in 2001, just prior to 9/11. After 9/11, I went to Florida and I went to a school at the time was called South Sky Aviation in Pompano Beach. They have since changed their name to Florida Aviation Academy. So I did my instrument rating, commercial and multi there.
And what was it like training here in Jamaica before 9/11, and what was the vibe or the atmosphere like during the 9/11?
The training here was good. I mean, local knowledge of the terrain and that type of stuff was always advantageous because I had every intention to come back to Jamaica and fly. So I think doing the PPL here was a good idea for me. I could have done everything in Florida, where everything is flat. But I think the route that I took was the best one. As far as in doing the training in Florida, there was no real vibe with regards to 9/11 per se. I just went up there and did my training. I completed that in about a 4-month period, from instrument rating to multi-commercial. So yeah, it was fine. Florida is a faster route to getting things done because of the availability of number of airplanes and VORs and this type of thing to do all of that stuff a lot quicker than it was here at the time. So that's the reason I did it that way.
Okay. And you worked for Airways International here at Titintipen for 4 years.
Correct.
And then Air Jamaica for 3 years.
Correct.
What was the transition like from commercial to airlines, and what was the experience working for both airlines?
Okay, so working for Airways was invaluable as far as I'm concerned. If you're doing any local flying to any extent, I mean, like I say, knowing the terrain. I mean, doing my PPL here was one thing, but when you fly commercial, if you're flying for the cargo operations, particularly for the cargo operations, you really get to know the land, the terrain, a lot more than, for example, someone who flies for Timir or Airlink, who is just flying mainly on the north coast, and they don't have to deal with weather, because if it's too questionable to fly, passengers are not interested in flying into rain or having to divert and stuff like that. As my boss Chris Reed always said to me, bags don't mind if you put one on someone else's lap. Right? Bags don't care about weather. Boxes and bags need to get where they're going. Right? So we as cargo pilots did a lot more real flying, for want of a better word. Especially in questionable conditions. I mean, there have been times when we've had to, as we look out here, we can see a lot of clouds over Stony Hill and going across the Blue Mountains, and there's no way through. But we still have to get to Baskerville. So we have to fly the long way around. What is normally a 30-minute trip turns into an hour and a half because you're going Morant Bay, Morant Point, come back around Point Antonio, and all the way around. Sometimes even to go to Montego Bay, same type of thing. You have to go shoreline all the way down to Negril and turn back just to get where you're going, because you need to get where you're going.
The bags
need to be where they need to be, right? I mean, the courier service is what it is. You know, you need to get your stuff. So whereas, you know, a passenger operation, you know, has restrictions. I mean, if the clouds are too low, rain falling, passengers get nervous, bags don't get nervous. As far as transitioning to the airline, it was a significant transition, because I was flying 206 and 182s. And then you jump into an A320 simulator. It's a completely different animal. The basics are the same, but there's a lot more that you need to learn. But you know, we had good instructors over there. My instructor was an Iranian instructor named Mr. Madavi, and then there are others, Philip Daly, Robbie Phillips, Lascelles Sams, who was my first line instructor. That was a flight. We had very good instructors at Air Jamaica, so you know it made it that much easier.
And so, what was it like flying with Air Jamaica itself? Like the great.
That's the dream. That's the dream. That is the reason I became a pilot. That was actually one of the questions that one day DFO at the time, Captain Golson, Paul Golson. When I went in for that interview, I have dual citizenship. I'm also a British citizen. At the time, my British passport was the only one that was valid at the time. So that's the one I presented with my application. And he looked at me and says, "Why should I hire you? You know, you're going to take your British citizenship and you're going to go off to England and fly there. You're going to take my training overseas." I said, "You know, I became a pilot to fly for Air Jamaica. Don't watch the passport." I'm a Jamaican. I have represented Jamaica in a number of sports as well as culture. I am a Jamaican. Don't watch the passport. Yeah, but flying for Air Jamaica was the dream. Literally living the dream.
Wow. And how did you feel, you know, when it wasn't in existence anymore?
Gutted. I was one of the first first pilots to be let go. Because I was the last batch in, you know, last in, first out, right? So myself and 5 other pilots were let go. A couple of them stayed and got rehired by Caribbean Airlines, like about 6, 8 months later. But luckily, I kind of saw the writing on the wall, and the previous year, so I got laid off in 2009. In latter part of 2008. Is when I interviewed for Etihad Airways, and I basically had gotten the job, but I was on a waiting list for as needed. So that actually took a year before I was actually hired. But I kind of had that in my back pocket. So when it actually happened in October, I think it was the first week of October is when I got laid off. Like a month later or so is when Etihad called and said, "Ready for you." So I actually started there the following year, 2010. Timing was like this industry is all about timing, time and place, luck, all of it. So everything kind of just worked out. I mean, those 2 months before they actually called me, between when I got laid off and when I got called for the job, that month and a half was stressful because there's no job, you know, and you're applying everywhere and you're waiting to hear back and stuff. But luckily Etihad called back and said, start. So I started there. Like I left Jamaica New Year's Eve.
Wow.
And landed in Abu Dhabi on New Year's Day 2010.
Wow. So you flew for them for 7 years.
7.5, yeah.
And how was that transition like, and how was it family-wise from moving from Jamaica to UAE?
Okay, so my family came with me, so there was no separation, at least not lengthy. I mean, when I went by myself. Like in January, by summer, my family was with me. So there wasn't any major separation there. Difference in flying is just about different cultures that you're flying with over there. When you're flying with Air Jamaica, you're flying with all Jamaicans. We're all the same people. So we have an understanding. When you're flying overseas with multiple different nationalities in one crew, There's just things that you think about. You can't make the same kind of joke that you'd make that you and I would make to someone else from another country. Or they wouldn't understand it, or they might take offense. And I remember there was a Jamaican girl that joined who, it turns out, I knew her mother. So we made a connection when she joined. It was a few years after I'd started, and she made a little joke with an Asian cabin crew. She was cabin crew, so she made a little joke. Come here, little China girl. Here in Jamaica, that would be nothing, right?
Yeah,
Nobody would take offense. She got reported.
Oh my goodness.
She got reported to her seniors and had to.
Wow.
Yeah, so you just need to think about those things, the kind of things that you would say. That's the way you talk, the way you express yourself. You don't want to offend anyone, so you're kind of on your P's and Q's that way. Not to say that is rigid.
Right.
Not that company anyway. There are other companies that are a little more rigid than others, but it was okay. And we were flying brand new airplanes and going to these different destinations was good as well.
What's one of your best the destination, more memorable destination?
Here's my thing. I'm not a tourist, so I like to fly the plane. Right? So when I go somewhere, when people ask me what do I do when I go to wherever it is I've been, I mean, if the crew isn't doing anything specific, I'm in my room watching TV, waiting to fly back, get into the airplane and fly back. So of all the countries that I've been to, I've never been like, I need to go and see this. I need to go and see that. I mean, I've done and seen a couple of things, but I've kind of had to be coerced. I mean, my friends always cuss me out. They see me, like on Facebook, for example, I might post something about in my hotel room from Munich, Germany. And they're like, why are you in the hotel room? What are you doing? You're in all of these countries. I've been to Sydney, I've been to Australia, I've been to Singapore, I've been all over the place, Japan. But have I gone to any memorable monuments or sightseeing or anything like that?
The cockpit.
Not particularly. I see a lot of airports. And that's it. Yeah.
So after Etihad now, you came back to Jamaica to fly Jamaica for 2 years. How
Correct.
did it feel to be back home flying for Jamaica?
It was like returning home, living the dream again. Living the dream again. Flying with my own people. Left base turning final 1-2. Nothing better. Manly.
So you currently work for Flyadeal Airlines in Saudi Arabia.
Correct.
Right. So then now you have to transition back into the UAE after having flying here again. So flying for Air Jamaica, then UAE for 7 years, coming back for 2 years, and then going back. Currently being there.
It wasn't as big a transition as the first time.
Right.
It's basically, I mean, the same region, same Middle East, same Muslim culture. So I was accustomed to it. So it wasn't a big transition as far as living amongst them is concerned. I was glad to be back in an Airbus because that's my airplane. That's what I was born and grew on, right? So getting back into an Airbus was lovely for me. The company is a nice company to work for. It's very new. It's only 3 years old. I think, yeah, it just turned 3 years old a few months ago. Everybody's nice. It's a nice company to work for, and they gave me the opportunity because when I joined, I wasn't current on Airbus anymore. So, but based on my history and my experience on the Airbus airplanes, because I've flown them all, not them all. I've flown 319, 320, 321, 330. 340. So I didn't get to the 380 nor the 350. But up to the point when I joined Flyadeal, I had 7,000 Airbus hours. So they took that into consideration when they hired me, even though I wasn't current. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to them for taking me.
So you said before you left Air Jamaica, you had the Etihad job in your back pocket.
Kind of, yeah.
Right. So was that the same scenario when it came to before you left Fly Jamaica with Flyadeal?
Not really. If the Flyadeal thing happened, When Flyadeal Jamaica had their incident and there was no flying going on, there was little, it didn't look bright. The future didn't look very bright, right? So I started looking around, and I just happened to have a former colleague from Air Jamaica who was at Flyadeal, who I ran into talking to on WhatsApp. And he mentioned that he was at this new company that I'd never heard about. And he said that they're hiring, so with what's going on with Flyadeal Jamaica, maybe you want to consider it. So I said okay, and I sent him my resume. He forwarded it to the recruiting, the chief pilot over there and the recruiting people. So with that I got an interview with the DFO via Skype in December. Thought I was to hear back from them in January. I didn't. Then February came along. They contacted me again. Did another interview with their HR department. That went well. Mm-hmm. So the next step was for them to send documentation to me so that I go and look about getting the visa and stuff like that. Then I didn't hear anything again for a couple of weeks, and then the Ethiopian 737 MAX crash happened.
Right.
And that delayed things as well, because their expansion plan was 50 737 MAXes. So that kind of put their whole plan awry, and it kind of shut everything else down. Everything was about that. I actually got another email in early March, or like about a week after the accident, saying that there's no more job. Right, so I started looking again. And then all of a sudden at the end of March, I get a phone call from the same guy I interviewed with from HR saying, oh, sorry about what happened in the past. The crash kind of messed up our plans. But anyway, we need here in 2 weeks. So I had to scramble to get stuff done. But yeah, that's how that happened. So I kind of had it in the bag. It was there, and then it wasn't there, and then it came back, and it was quite a roller coaster.
And even then I said that they need you for 2 weeks. It was easier for you, being that you have been there for 7 years before. So
it's if it was Japan, it would have been the same thing. I would have had to go.
Not true.
So where the job was didn't make a difference. Just the fact that I got a job. Yes, please. Alright, so 6 Hotel Tango. This was my first ever airplane that I ever flew. It was a fam flight when I was thinking about becoming a pilot, and I came down to Wings, and myself and the instructor was Gerald Ford, who is now a captain at Caribbean Airlines. Took me up and had me at the controls all the way, almost from takeoff to land. And I did most of my training on this here. This was when it had wings. But yeah, lots of good memories of my flight training with myself and Nick Shaw, who ended up being my instructor. Also an our captain at Caribbean Airlines. Yep. Man, memories of flying right seat in this with a trainee. I remember one of
you instructor after a while?
I wasn't really an instructor, but when Kareem joined us at Tingda, he was a trainee.
Okay.
But trainee fly left seat.
Okay.
Right? So I was a senior captain. Right, so I could fly right seat. So enough time me and Kareem out there battle weather. I remember when I was a trainee, I'm flying, we were coming back from Baskerville, me and the chief pilot at the time, Robert James. And we are come through
Hagley's Gap.
No, not Hagley's Gap. Come through Stony Hill, Castleton, what a town name again, man? Jeez, it's been so long. No.
Golden Spring?
Golden Spring side.
Right.
So we're coming through, and the weather is down. And I'm flying, right? And I'm like, blow, 1,000 foot. And I'm like, and he's like, go under it. I was like, go under, so I push the nose over and I go 800 feet. I'm like, blow. Man, so I have control. And so, yeah, and so we are looking, we are look up here, so to see what going on level, because we do, I saw it there, and I turn around and say, son. Right? Nowadays, but by the time we're done, by the time you're accustomed to this thing, you're coming like not enough time. I come down at like 400 feet through the gap there and climb up to come over Stony Hill and dip that down, There's a little gap that you can cross at 800 foot.
Okay.
You're waving at people on them balcony. But there's that gap. See there? You can see the gap from right here, so. About 800 or 900 foot, you can clear it.
Easy, nice.
I don't know what easy, right? But you can clear it.
And how has the pandemic impacted the field, and the industry?
Well, we all know.
The airline industry, fell kind of the hardest once the pandemic hit. So how has that been first-hand experience? Okay, so it's affected everybody. It didn't affect us as hard as it did most of the other airlines. Okay. I guess worldwide. We are a domestic operation. We only operate within Saudi Arabia. So it's all domestic. So we don't have any international flights that we're losing. That's not the case for all the other airlines in Saudi Arabia. The country did lock down, and there was no movement of any form of transportation for 2 months. So even though they had closed the borders in early March, we were still operating because we're only domestic. Right. Then they shut down all forms of public transportation, including airlines. So that's when we stopped flying at the end of March. So end of March, April, and all of May, we were not flying. Then they reopened public transportation, so we started flying again in June. The other good thing about my company is that they had done so well in the first 2 years of their operation that they were able to continue to pay us full salary. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. So that was completely opposite to what was going on in the rest of the world, particularly in the Middle East. Etihad, Emirates, Qatar, all of those guys were cutting pay by 50%, laying off staff. They're still laying off staff. Luckily, that hasn't happened to us. So, again, something else to give thanks for.
And if you would be able to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
I hate that question because I never know how to answer it. I just keep pushing, I guess. Just keep pushing. Go for what you want. There's going to be challenges, and I think that is particular for young pilots who want to further their career. That is, you're going to have to want it. It's going to be challenging. So yeah, that's it. But I have no regrets. The path my life has taken. I mean, I didn't start flying until I was 36 years old. That's when I actually started flying. So I've been very fortunate. I mean, not everybody can say that they can start learning to fly and have an airline job and your dream airline job in a 4-year period. That happened to me, and I'm very grateful for that. So, it's all about luck, timing, and this type of thing.
And what would your advice be to younger folks now who are trying to get into the industry?
Again, you really have to want it because it's a very challenging time now. We don't have a lot of options for work here, as far as I know. You've got your tour operators in primarily in Montego Bay. But they have only X amount of planes. They only need X amount of pilots. So you have to wait for someone to transition to another phase of their career. And for Jamaicans, it's Caribbean Airlines. So until Caribbean Airlines hires again, there might not be any movement. So maybe it's a good time to start your training because there's nothing else going on. Hopefully within a year or two, things will pick back up. By that time, you hopefully may have already completed all your ratings, your instrument rating, your commercial, your multi. so that by the time the industry picks back up again, you're ready to pounce on it, or at least to, when someone else who is higher up in the food chain than you are at the moment moves on, then you can get a spot. But the spots are limited, so it's going to be a challenge, and you have to think about that. The other thing that you have to consider is that, like myself, you might end up having to go overseas to fly. You may not be able to take your family, so you may be commuting back and forth, and that can be costly. You may not be able to do it very regularly. So, it's a challenging field. It's challenging for family as well, unless you have a job in Jamaica. So those are the things that you need to think about when you think about aviation as a career.
So you flew Airbus in UAE, but when you had to come back to Jamaica, you flew Boeing.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was a bit of a transition. I mean, you're coming from a side stick back to the yoke. I've never flown outside of a Cessna. I've never flown a yoke jet before. So there was a bit of a getting used to type of thing. But it's an airplane. When you go this way, it goes up. When you go this way, it goes down. Same with the Airbus, right? So an airplane is an airplane. There's the technology is different depending on which airplane you fly. I mean, I came back to fly 757 and 767, older version, but it does the same thing with everything else. So I'm still flying an airplane, right? So it's really not about the equipment. I mean, I know there are factions out there. There's the Airbus faction that I am a part of. There's the Boeing faction that other people in this hangar might be a part of, right? And there's always that discussion, if it's Boeing, if it ain't Boeing, I'm not going. But hey, an airplane is an airplane. I'm sure that Boeing guy, if an Airbus opportunity comes up, he's not gonna say I'm not taking the job because it's Airbus. You're gonna fly whatever they give you. If they give me a 182 to fly, that can allow me to feed my family and send my kids to school, to be able to come back to Jamaica, I might do that. So, but yeah, everybody, there are advantages and disadvantages to either of them, right? At the end of the day, it's just an airplane. So we make jokes, with Ron and Ravid. I mean, that's Airbus and Boeing right there, right? Always fighting on the group chat, but it's just an airplane. It's just an airplane.
All right. So you mentioned the different types of aircrafts that you flew for Airbus. What was the difference in the 320 family?
Basically length. You have 318, 319, 320, and 321. The only difference is really length, because they all use basically the same engines. The wingspan is the same. The top of the tail to the floor is the same. The only real difference is length. So particularly the 321, there's a concern about tail strike based on your pitch when you're rotating as well as your landing. But they all fly. I fly them the same way. Some people are telling me that there's a different way to fly this one versus that one. I fly all Airbuses exactly the same way, from 320, 330, 340. It's basically the same airplane, just with obvious differences. Different specification, but the system, in particular in the 320 family, which covers 318 all the way to 321, the systems are exactly the same. Minor differences. But that's it really. 330 is just a bigger Airbus. And the systems are slightly different. It's basically the same thing. Every system has an electrical system. Every airplane has a hydraulic system, whatever it is. There are small differences between the 320 and the 330, because it's really just a differences course when you're transitioning. You don't have to do a full course from point zero to a thing there when you're transitioning particularly between the Airbus families. And it's the same between the 330 and 340. The 340 has 2 more engines. Dimensions are different now. It's a different airplane and it's a different type rating. But as far as flying the airplane is concerned, It's basically the same. The cockpit layout is exactly the same for all the Airbuses from 320 to 340. 4 screens. 200 left, 200 right, 2 in the center. 380 and 350 is actually different. You have other systems there, but they made it that way so that the transition between going from one to the other is almost seamless. Yeah.
All right, Captain Richard, this was a really great discussion, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to come and talk with us and inspiring young aviators out there, and we wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here. Very.